Hello, my name is Ian Kinder, and you are watching a Live Safe Academy LLC production. This Google Hangout is featuring Sergeant Brian Bastianelli of Fortis Group. And let me start off by introducing myself a little bit. I'm the owner and founder of a school called Live Safe Academy, and we are a safety and self-defense school. So we specialize in the training of first aid, assault and crime prevention, unarmed self-defense, the use of chemical defense sprays, sharp weapons, impact weapons, tasers, and firearms. If you'd like to learn more about our school, please visit us online at livesafeacademy.com. I appreciate your viewership. Thank you very much for watching. And Sergeant Bastianelli, welcome to the program. It's an honor to have you here, sir.
Great, thank you, Ian. It's awesome to be here with you as well.
Well, let me start off by saying that Brian is one of my closest training partners. I think we started working together back in 2000. And Brian is a phenomenal trainer. He's going to be featured on our podcast series soon. He's had unfortunately, some issues with health in his family, which I'm very sorry to hear about because I love his family. And we haven't been able to feature him in the podcast yet, but we will. And but I've been working with Brian for a long time. He's a phenomenal trainer. Brian, like me, would call Lou Kyoto our teacher. We'd also call Sergeant Joseph Ferrer our teacher. But I always tell my students, even if you train with Lou, even if you train with Joe, you should absolutely train with Brian because he's a very unique trainer and he has a very unique approach where people are going to benefit in ways that they're only going to get from training with Brian. And I really do mean that sincerely. You're an innovative trainer. I learn a lot from you. I'm a better trainer because of you. And it really means a lot to me that you come on this show here and gives me a chance to talk about your training group and all the great work that you guys do. And why don't you start off a little bit with your background, and then we'll talk about Fortis Group.
Well, I thank you, Ian, for those kind words. Look, I feel that I'm so lucky to be able to be amongst a fine trio of instructors like you, Lou, and Joe. I've developed myself just being a part of that group. One of the best groups I could ever ask to be with. And as I developed as an instructor over all these years. Basically, my background has been primarily in law enforcement. I did some time with the military when I got out of high school, like a lot of young men do. When I got done with the military, I went into public service, and there I've been for about 20 years. Started out in the EMS field as a paramedic and a firefighter, moved on to law enforcement, and that's where I've been for the last 18. It's been an interesting career, and I've seen and experienced a lot of things, especially when it comes to some of the topics that we teach about in terms of use of force. Probably sometime around 1999, I became a full-time trainer with the police department I work for. And as in that position, I was responsible for training all of our personnel. I also taught at 2 of the police academies in the area, in the Detroit area, which I was able to really hone my skills as an instructor. And being able to train at the most basic of levels in terms of mechanics and skill level to all the way up to now, teaching very advanced level training. And really, if it wasn't for the 3 of you guys I just mentioned, I don't think I'd be half the trainer I am today, and that's being honest with you. But for the most part, in right about 2010, I and my partner, Sergeant Rich Blenda, we've been together for a long time as trainers. We decided to start a company to kind of address some of the specialized needs of law enforcement and the civilian community at large. We felt that there was just so many areas that we could develop and take some of the methods that we've learned along the way and our experiences that we learned along the way and apply them, in these training communities. And we've had a lot of satisfaction training in meeting such a huge number of police officers and and citizens, to see them develop and to make them better at what they need to accomplish in their mission or their life.
Well, Brian, if I may be so blunt to kind of be honest with the listeners and the viewers and say, you know, police officers are obviously, depending on where they work and specifically what they do, can be a very dangerous job. And unfortunately, police officers generally get lied to from the moment they walk into the academy, and they continue to lie to, you know, for the rest of their career. And hopefully they get enough field experience where they can figure out the difference between what they're being told and what reality is, and hopefully they can learn those lessons without paying a big price for it. And, you know, I know you're very committed to officer safety, and you're one of those people out there that are trying to bring truth to officers so that they're not having to pay that price in the field, so they're not having to learn things through experience that their training didn't prepare them for. So can you kind of talk a little bit about how your training is different than maybe a lot of the more conventional methods? You know, in the public, unfortunately, a lot of what's taught is self-defense. It simply doesn't work. And that's true for law enforcement too, despite a lot of the popular belief that cops get a certain level of training, and they do obviously get training, but there's a lot of problems in the field of law enforcement training too, and dedicated officers like you are trying to correct those issues so that you can save officers' lives, and so those officers are better prepared to save the life of the public, the people that they're dedicated to serving.
Well, absolutely well said, Ian, and you know, and coming up through the last, you know, 18 years in law enforcement from the police academy on, I found myself having a lot of frustration in that regard. Some of the methods that I was taught, some of the ways that I was taught in those methods, just had a lot of contradiction to them. Contradiction in terms of what could be done in those static environments, such as in the dojo or the mat room or on the gun range. And when I became a sworn officer and started working in the field, I'll tell you, there was quite a sense of unease with me. You know, questions came to mind like, you know, I've got this gun issued to me. Am I going to be able to come out of the holster quick enough if I get attacked, if somebody tries to kill me, or somebody tries to kill my partner or a citizen? And some very large question marks swarmed over my head during my early formative years as a police officer. And then as time progressed, I noticed that training really didn't change much. We were still getting kind of the same drumbeat, if you will, of what was said to be, you know, the best training that you can get as a police officer. And again, you're going into this profession thinking, you know what, hundreds of years of experience, trainers that have gone before me, trainers that have taught me. You're thinking, well, these guys know what they're doing. They've been there. They've been in shootings. They've been in fights, and you look to them, you know, for the best advice. Well, you know, I did as I grew and I got experience and got into, you know, many altercations, physical altercations. I learned very quickly that some of the stuff that I was taught, some of the stuff that was being taught at the time, just did not translate into real-world application. So when I became a trainer, I set out on a mission to seek that knowledge, and in doing so, I was extremely fortunate enough to be able to come across you know, just phenomenal mentors like Lou, like Joe, like Papatachik, like Nick Colling, and a number of other fine instructors and fine gentlemen that really introduced me to the important parts of training, the important methods that we need to be practicing diligently to better prepare for that moment where we may have to apply those skills in defense of ourselves or others. And so that's what kind of led me on my quest. And once I got that knowledge from these gentlemen, I felt it a moral and ethical burden, if you will. We'll call it a burden, even though it's a passion, a love of labor to spread that method, to spread that training philosophy. And it was, although it's been around for a very long time, the methods I'm talking about, and you're very familiar with them, Ian, you know, it was considered to be all of a sudden cutting edge. And really the methods, like I said, being that they've been around for so long, we started applying them, and we got incredible responses from officers. And obviously, to get more into detail, we really embraced the necessity to emphasize target-focused shooting or reactionary firearms training over the traditional precision shooting that was being done for many years. And when we did that, it really created a very large interest by officers to continue to seek out that training. And surprising, funny on the self-defense side, the combative side, a lot of the police training that went on into the 80s and into the 90s really was dumbed down. It was very not physical. A lot of the boxing that used to take place in police academies stopped, probably for fear of liability and injuries. But some of the real-world stuff that did go on back in the 60s and 70s that officers were trained, that didn't happen for me and many of the other officers that went through police academies around the state and the country, for that matter. And so, again, going back to those big question marks that formed over my head. And so my objective was to get back to what is important in training. And that is getting back into the physicality of training, getting back into the methods that work, that are proven, and spreading it. And it wasn't hard to do, because once you start doing that, as you know, Ian, because we both kind of traveled this road together over all these years, once that reality comes out, people they thirst for it. And so that's kind of what led me up to changing my philosophies. And again, I wouldn't have been able to do that without the likes of the great men that have gone before me.
Well, another thing that you and I are very passionate about, and that we're 100% in a like mind about, is the importance of skill integration. Because a lot of times in law enforcement training, and you get your firearm skills are done one way, you get your unarmed, your unarmed methods are done another way. You got your pepper sprays done another way. Tasers are done another way. Your expandable baton is done another way. And all these things are very different, and they don't integrate well, and they're treated as separate skills. But of course, in real fights, that's not how it happens. First of all, you don't always know what type of force method you're going to have to deploy. So the idea that you're going to be in a certain stance or a certain way is not realistic. But then the brain just doesn't function that way either. So, in fact, I'll give viewers here a chance to go out to my website, livesafeacademy.com, and if you look under locations, you'll see Fortis Group. There's a video there that I posted from you, Brian, that you created, that really gives a great example of how you integrate these different skill methods, unarmed combat with firearms, with impact weapons. And that's something I'm a strong believer in. That's how we build our training program. And maybe you can talk a little bit about your philosophy in regard to skill, the integration, and how you take all these things and you bring them together.
Yeah, super, Ian. And just bridging from right where I left off in that regard, some of those question marks that I had through my development in training was just that. For example, when I went through the police academy, you had your self-defense instructors teaching certain methods if somebody was to present a lethal weapon, and then you would go to the firearms cadre, and they would teach you a completely different approach instead of trying to weave it together. And it's been 20 years, and I think we're now starting, as a law enforcement community, as a community of trainers, realizing not only the importance but the necessity of weaving these skills together in an effort to improve overall response time. Some of the methods that we try to use when we integrate training components, whether it be unarmed methods or armed methods, we're trying to weave these techniques together into a fabric where it makes decision making very easy. A lot of it involves utilizing skills that fit together like a puzzle, that all come out of one platform or one base, and that's where I was very fortunate to be able to be in a position where I could seek out these different methods and try different techniques, try different methodologies, and start trying to piece them together to what make best sense to better prepare. Another big factor of this skill integration part of it is just the fact that another part of training that's really been deficient, in my opinion, has been we as trainers, we in the law enforcement community have spent a lot of time developing motor skills, developing that perfect draw stroke out of the holster, developing that perfect sight picture and extraction from the holster and all that. We do thousands and thousands of repetitions. Same thing with our defensive tactics methods. We do the same thing there. You're spending a lot of time practicing all these different techniques, to try and hone your skills. But the reality of it is that the techniques just were not compatible, and not only were they not compatible, but there was the whole mental component of the training. As Joe Ferreira has said, a number of times, we learn best from Joe when it comes to reaction time, response time, and all the components that make up that. You know that the overall response time is reaction time plus movement time. Well, we've done a lot of practice with movement, but we haven't spent very little time on the mental aspects of it, and that is things like threat recognition, identifying the precursors to assaults, and paying attention to those threat cues that present to us. Now, that can be applied to anybody's situation that's potentially being threatened with physical assault. And so I spend a great deal of time taking the very best I know in that area and the very best of our training mechanics development, their skill development, the motor skills, and combining them together in an effort to reduce overall response time. And in doing so, we've seen some tremendous results with these approaches. And I'll give you a quick example, probably one of the highlight examples of this. I was back in early 2000s. I was a primary firearms instructor at one of the community colleges academies, and we had just gotten done converting our primary philosophy to target-focused shooting, thanks to Luke Kyoto. And we practiced those methodologies, put them into practice, that is, and we had tremendous results. The recruits were just doing absolutely phenomenal, making the jump to reactionary training. Not only did they perform well, their combat accuracy was just superior. They enjoyed it. They loved doing it. And so we had tremendous results. And so here I am thinking, all right, I can't wait to get these recruits into reality-based training. And customarily, at the end of the academy is when a lot of the scenario-based exercises come with the simunitions and simulated ammunition. And we would place the recruits into a full dynamic role play. And so of course I tried to set one of the scenarios up specific to what I was looking for to try and extract our training methods and evaluate if we were effective in making this transition to target-focused shooting and if the recruits absorbed what we gave them. And so I designed a very typical non-aggressive, non-threatening scenario where the recruit would have to approach a suspicious person, very generic, very common call that police officers go on, and they would approach the person and basically have to identify them and figure out what they were doing in the area. And so the role players were instructed, the role player was instructed that when the recruit got within the magical 21-foot distance mark and to get closer to be able to get into conversation distances, the role player was to draw a semi-automatic simunition weapon that fires, simunition cartridges, marking cartridges, at the recruit. And our projected performance measure there was that the recruit was able to identify the threat quickly, move offline because we taught a lot of movement, draw their weapon and engage in the lethal encounter and prevail. Much to our chagrin, a huge number of the recruits, and normally a recruit academy is right around 40, 45 around that time. We probably only had maybe 1 or 2 recruits that even survived that scenario, that in terms of being hit with marking cartridges in what we would be considered pretty significantly lethal areas. So, as you know, I was pretty devastated. So I was thinking, we found the magic. And so, after going home and drowning my sorrows in beer, I called my good friend Joe Ferreira, and I said, Joe, this is what we did, and I was really disappointed with the results. I figured we were just going to have great results in reality-based scenarios. And Joe, I'll never forget this conversation. Joe said, Brian, he's like, look, you're missing the most very basic concept here. You're taking the recruit from the static environment of the range where you have paper targets that are not shooting back, no stress element, and you're putting him into full dynamic simulation with nothing in between. And he equated it to a temperature scale, with the static being cold, like the water coming out of a faucet, and the full dynamic being hot. We missed the warm. And so I said, okay, Joe, all right, talk to me, buddy. You're making sense. And Joe said, look, you got to get them through fluid training. You've got to find a way to develop them more, to bridge that gap between static and dynamic. So you need to get creative and start thinking about ways of helping them, immerse them into more of a fluid environment where they can practice their newfound skills. So I said, okay, all right. So I went back to the drawing board, and I developed a couple things. One was threat recognition drills, which was an exercise where recruits were actually drawing real firearms on each other. Of course, very, triple checked safe and all that to make sure that there's no ammunition and no ammunition in the training environment. But I wanted to have a real firearm or a real looking firearm because I felt that there wasn't going to be any benefit of the recruit looking at a red gun or something like that. That's not real. They need to look at what a real gun looks like when it's pointed at them, because nearly all of them.
Brian, hold on one second. No, I don't want to get you off track because you're making a great point here, and you're singing my song because you and I are so much like thinkers on this. It's just amazing, and it's one of the reasons why we're so close as training partners. But I just want to stop people for just a second and hear what you said about using real guns when you've taken the proper precautions to make sure it's safe in a controlled environment, and specifically having people get in front of those guns or use those real guns to point at people so that the first time that happens, it's not in a real situation. Because as I always stress to students, and I'm not saying anything that you don't know, Brian, and I'm not trying to get you off track here, but we take a lot of grief because we do this type of training. But I've been involved in law enforcement training since 1990, and this is how it was always done when I did it, and I know it was always done that way before. You don't want the first time you point a gun at somebody, a real gun, to be in a real situation. You want to deal with that in training. And you also don't want the first time that you have a real gun pointed at you to be in a real situation. You want to deal with that in training too. Obviously with all the appropriate safety protocols. But there's so many trainers out there, and even people that are brought up by these trainers, that the whole concept of using a real gun in these interactive training, even though the appropriate safety protocols are taken, It just, they're completely adamantly opposed to it. They call it reckless and unsafe. It's not reckless and unsafe. And in fact, in my opinion, it's not it's not really something that as a trainer or as a practitioner you need to do these things. They're important. So I don't want to get you too off track on that because where you're going was very good. But I do want to draw people's attention to this. Like Lou, like Joe, Brian, and myself, these are standard things in law enforcement that are very important to helping people have a better chance of success in a real situation.
Well, you couldn't have underscored that any better. And, you know, I too have seen that same kind of grief, especially, you know, with experienced shooters, with people that have been around guns for a long time. In their mind, it breaks one of the cardinal rules of firearm safety. And I get that. But if it's done in a controlled environment with all those safety protocols, and those safety protocols have gotten nothing but better now, there's all kinds of neat little gadgets that you can put inside of chamber blocks and other identifiers that make it very visible and clear that the gun is unloaded and safe and cannot be loaded, which we use nowadays now that we have that equipment available to us. But you know, back then I think all we did was just, you know, we checked the guns, 2-3 of us firearms instructors down the line. It was triple checked each gun, and then we had one instructor come to the rear and tape the guns, tape the magazine well, tape the barrel. So it was still very clear that the gun was safe and could not be loaded without having to remove the tape on the magazine well. So yeah, you can do it very safely, and yes, it is absolutely critical. You got to know what a real gun looks like when it's pointed at you. You don't want that first time when that gun comes your direction in a real-world situation where somebody's trying to kill you, and you, because you've never identified that, how can your brain even come up with a plan if it's never seen that before? I mean, the majority of the information that we're getting in these situations are what? Visual. It's through our eyes. And so, you know, we need to train that. That needs to be instituted in us so that it's very as soon as the butt of a gun starts clearing a waistband or coming out from behind someone's back, being leveled up towards you for whatever reason, you know what that is. There's no question in your mind because you've seen it 100 times in threat recognition drills and in training. And that's what gets everything going. And that is part of the big equation when it comes to improving your response time. So going back to what we were doing, so we instituted these threat recognition drills. And we did it every morning before range started, before ammunition was even brought out of the gun range. And the recruits would get, you know, at least 50+ repetitions in of getting guns pointed at each other. Of course, the recruits were taught how to respond right, stepping off line, yelling gun, extracting their firearm, pointing it towards the adversary. And then they'd reset the drill. So we instituted that in the next police academy, as well as our threat recognition drill, our target focus shooting methods. And then we took those, once they went through that, we took them into a fluid environment where they were shooting airsoft weapons at instructors with closed eyes, opening them up. This is a drill that Lou Kyoto is perfected, and I started utilizing after I trained with Lou with it. And I would go down the line with the recruits. They'd open their eyes. They'd see what type of threat it was, whether it was lethal, a knife, a real-looking knife, a real knife, okay, a blade, a real-looking gun, a real gun, and they would respond the way that they were trained, building up, okay? And so we get through that part of it. We get to the scenarios. Now, Brian's got his hands ringing, and we're just wondering how things are going to work out here, right? We're hoping that this was the answer. This was our chalice, and we put this in the next class recruits do this same exact scenario, same exact role player, same exact proctor, me, and we ran the scenario. And I will tell you, the results were absolutely amazing. I was absolutely astounded. These recruits were recognizing the threat even before the weapon was even brought out of the waistband. Now, mind you, these scenarios are meant to be very innocuous. We don't want them going into the scenario automatically thinking they're going to be in a gunfight, right? We want to really, truly try to test their response time as best we can. So, and their reaction. So, you know, as soon as the role player, I noticed as soon as the role player started extracting their firearm from their waistband, the front of the waistband, which is the most common place criminals carry guns, and it's also the very fastest way to deploy a gun. You know, we had the recruits stepping offline, engaging with non-traditional sighted fire, target focus shooting, the way they were trained, scoring unbelievable combat hits on the role player, and not getting hit in the process. And we had over a 95% success rate with recruits. What an amazing turn of events there, and I will automatically throw a shout out to Joe Ferreira and thank him for that, because ever since then I learned a very valuable lesson that I apply to all my training. That those key elements of cold, warm, hot.
Yep, and I've borrowed from your training methods in that regard too. I've incorporated some of the things that you've done into our own type of training, because those are things that we do also, and they're great, and they're very helpful, and they help the student, and they increase performance, and they're essential aspects of the training if we're talking about real world performance. And I think that's great that you really zero in on those aspects of training, and that you use them so effectively in your programs. And let's talk a little bit about your programs, Brian. I know we have the Officer Survival School for close quarter ambushes, and I'm very honored that you've brought me in to be a part of that teaching team. It's not very often, I would say, that you get non-law enforcement guys that are actively involved in law enforcement, but our school works quite a bit with law enforcement. We're an MCOST approved criminal justice training provider. In Michigan, that's the Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement Standards. That'll be like posts for other states for those of you that are watching this. And I've been a trainer for law enforcement since 1990. But tell us a little bit about that. I know you have a surveillance school, and then I believe you have a couple other programs too. And I would like you to take a couple minutes and talk about all of them.
Well, sure, yeah, and kind of jumping off from where we left off in terms of use of force training. When I established Fortis Group, when Rich and I established Fortis Group, we really wanted to go into those areas that were desperately needed for training. We didn't want to go out and just do your standard tactical handgun class or your standard shooting class. That's being done, and it's being done by many people, and some very good, some not so good. And we wanted to address a problem, and so when Fortis was established, 2010, and you'll know this, Ian, is that 2010, 2011, 2012 were some of the most deadliest years for law enforcement in terms of felonious assaults and felonious murders of law enforcement, and it was starting to actually alarm the profession. You started to see a lot of articles and periodicals about the alarming rates of these deaths, and so I took note of that, and I really wanted to develop a training class that was a extremely high impact class to deal with that specific situation. So you look at how officers are being killed in the line of duty predominantly, and we wanted to apply all these methods we just talked about that we've honed and developed over the years, and try and bring them all together in that skill integrated approach. And we came up with a close quarter ambush survival school. And I call it that because that's exactly what it is. It's a class to help officers better deal with hypervigilant offenders, or hyperviolent offenders that are trying to take advantage of an officer's distraction or an officer's complacency or just the circumstances of the situation, and they ambush the officer in close quarters. And that's how the majority of police officers are being killed around the country, with a handgun in extreme close quarters. And the school, really the model of the school kind of goes back to a great quote out of The Art of War, which is the old quote that says, if you know yourself and you know your enemy, then you will win 100 battles. If you know only yourself and not your enemy, then for every win you'll have a loss. And if you know neither yourself nor the enemy, then you will lose every time. I'm paraphrasing, of course. But that is the meaning behind that saying, and I take that to heart. So we apply that saying to this class. We want to take a look at not just ourselves and our preparedness, but we want to look at the offender. And so, we've gathered up all the best data that's out there of what these situations look like, the distances, the weapons involved, the time of day, the number of offenders, all the circumstances involving these deaths, these murders, and look at the offender and the profile of the offender, the profile of the cop killer, and there's a lot of great information out there that the FBI has collected over the years, super studies that we can take that information and apply it to our training. And we don't have, I always go back to the fact, and I'll digress for a second, we don't have unlimited training time, right, Ian? I mean, we only have, we only have the time that's allotted to us. In law enforcement specifically, it's the amount of time our agencies give us to train. And, you always have to keep in mind that because time is limited, training time, because resources are limited, especially nowadays when it's sometimes kind of hard to find bullets, you have to have extremely impactful training. And so we take a 3-day course and we pack a whole lot of training into it. And ultimately, our goal is to prepare that officer to better handle those close quarter spontaneous attacks by the things we just talked about. Developing their mind, they're able to recognize these threats, pre-attack cursors, what the offender looks like, situations that are usually come. We have to kind of train on statistical probabilities. Do officers get killed by being sniped at 100 yards from a rooftop? Sure they do, but we have to train on what is the preponderance of circumstances, the statistics, what the statistics tell us, and that is they're close-quartered, they're spontaneous, they're unexpected most of the time. And most of the time when officers are attacked, their weapons are in their hand, their weapons are in their holsters. And so we take those statistics and we specifically build a program to improve survival in those circumstances. Not only to lethal, but also non-lethal assaults, because a lot of times, lethal assaults start out as non-lethal assaults. And officers have to quickly be able to transition from one to the other and recognize that. So we take those methods and those fantastic methods passed on to us from Lou, and we take those fantastic methods that have been passed on to Joe and other instructors I've had influence, like combatives such as Krav Maga and some of the unarmed weapon control methods that you teach, Ian, which are just absolutely outstanding and fantastic. I'd have nobody else teach that. And we bring together this cadre of experts, and we break out into round-robin sessions, and we start our skill development. And we weave it all together. We tune the officers up, because a lot of them come to us with a little bit of rust. We tune them up. We get them fast. We get them recognizing quickly. We get them aggressive. When they needed to be defending them, themselves, their lives, and we weave it all together into overall hoping that we have an improved response time in the end. And we prepare for all those different circumstances, whether the officer is being attacked with a knife, blunt impact weapon, personal weapons, firearm, and we, ground defense, takedown defense, because that's very common now. And we take those methods and then we test them, right? Just like we did at the police academy. That story I gave you. We take it to reality base on the last day. We gear up in our fist suits and our red man suits. We set up traffic stop scenarios. We set up suspicious people and domestic situations where high probabilities where officers are likely to engage in be engaged in a lethal confrontation, and we test it. And just after a couple days, again, we have had tremendous results. We've done two pilot classes so far. We've done one, at the Macomb Community College on the east side. We did one at the Troy Police Department in conjunction with the Oakland County Sheriff's Department. And we had a number of officers from all different agencies. You remember, Ian, you were there. And we, as an instructor cadre, were just truly impressed by what we developed in just 3 days. But the most important part of this, is obviously the feedback we get from our students, right? That's always important for us, Ian. You know, knowing if we're getting the message through, if the training is sinking in, if they're finding value to it. I'll tell you what, Ian, I've never had comments from seasoned veteran officers. I've never seen comments like these before. I've had comments like, these are written comments. I still have them. I hold them dear to my heart. You know, you saved my life. This is the best training I've ever had. You know, why haven't we been doing this forever? You know, I mean, cops don't pour that kind of information out usually. You know, and to have them put that down in writing really meant a lot to me. And you know, especially right now, here we are. We're going into another year of National Police Week. You know, tomorrow being National Police Officer Memorial Day. And when we go into these situations, remember our fallen brothers and sisters. It just re-energizes me. And so to have this discussion with you at this time of year is just absolutely, it just re-energizes me. It just gets me going. I want to go out and do it right now, and get out there and do a class. So that's something a little bit about our Close Quarter Ambush Survival School, Ian. And I can't thank you enough for being a part of it.
Oh, well, thank you. It's my honor, of course. And let me kind of build on the compliments that you deserve for the program that you put together, because, you know, I be very honest with people. I said that cops get lied to from the very first day they walked in the academy to the, you know, throughout their entire career. And a lot of times people will be very critical of cops and say, well, they're terrible students because, you know, they question things a lot. But in my opinion, that makes them the best students in the world and really the easiest to connect with, because the reason why they question so much is because, again, if they have that field experience, they know that their life hangs in the balance of the things that they're being taught, and they know that most of what they get taught is not necessarily so good. So they become critical out of necessity, but that's a good thing because you're supposed to evaluate. All students should be like that. But the flip end of that is when you offer them the truth, they recognize it and they appreciate it. And a lot of law enforcement training is not only maybe not so good, but a lot of it's pretty damn boring because it's the same things over and over again that aren't that good. So now your program comes along and you've got these officers that are so enthusiastic and so motivated and so hungry to learn it and literally happy to be there. How often do you see that kind of feedback in law enforcement training? You don't. And that's because they're connecting with the program, because they understand that it's now they're getting what they need to get. Like you said, you know, you saved my life, because they're recognizing that they're being told the truth and that these are things that they can actually implement, that these are things that are actually going to help them do their job better and to keep them safer, to keep their partners safer and the people that they're protecting safer. And when you're that person that your safety hangs in a balance of the choices that you make, you really have a high appreciation for the things that help you make better choices. And you know, I think that's a compliment to you, Brian, because you're passionate enough that you want to provide that type of service. You know, you're not just out there going through the routine and doing the standard quo. You really want to make a difference. And I know you working behind the scenes, it was hard for you to get through a lot of these innovations that you've done, but you did it. And you did it because you're passionate about it, and people, they really appreciate that.
Well, thanks, Ian. And you know, I passed the same kind of enthusiasm into civilian training, just like you, and you know, we developed, you know, as you know, and I know that, you know, because we taught the CPL classes, the basic CPL classes for years. You know that even in that short period of time, we give the student the very best that we can, but it's a very short period of time. It's 8 hours, and a lot of it has to be classroom, and a lot of it has to turn out into be, very basic gun handling skills, because a lot of students that come to us, they've never even handled a firearm before, and so you got to start very slow. So, you know, again, addressing a need, you know, just like you, Ian, with advanced concealed carry classes, you know, we started putting together some of these same concepts in a stair-step fashion. We do an advanced concealed carry series for our civilian clients, and appreciate Live Safe. We've had many referrals from you, and I hope that you've had from us, because again, we run with a wonderful pack of instructors, and we all have our own flavor and our own approach, and and we bring something a little bit different to the game. And I think all our students and our mutual students that have come through both of our schools, Lou's school as well and Joe's, all get a little something different from all of us, and it makes them a better student. So, we started doing the advanced concealed carry series. We also started a carbine class. In fact, Live Safe and Fortis ventured up last summer. We did a great carbine class out of Livingston Conservation, and what a great outing that was, coming together, partnering up with our student base, and again, you got a lot of people out there that after Sandy Hook went out and snapped up the first AR-15 they could, because they felt it was going to be hard to get or very expensive to get, which turned out to be true for a while. And people needed training on it. So again, you and I saw a training need, and we stepped up and provided them a very good curriculum. So we continue with that carbine class. We also have a couple other basic flagship classes, and I won't spend too much time talking about all of our classes. People can always go to our website if they're interested in seeing the kind of classes that we do. But a couple other classes that I'm really proud of is we do a surveillance course for officers. We've gotten extremely good feedback from that class. It is all reality-based, and that's, again, something different. Officers aren't stuck in a classroom for days on end listening to somebody lecture out in front of the class. We run a police scenario that involves criminal elements from narcotics trafficking to home invasion crews and people breaking into cars, and our students go out after they learn the surveillance 101 stuff. They go out and they run a scenario, and they get about 32 hours of actual field experience. So it's great for them if they've never worked in that kind of a capacity, because not every cop has done surveillance, right? Out of the police academy, you go into the patrol car and you service the community, and sometimes some of us go into those roles where we need to follow bad guys around so we can catch them in the act. And I've been very lucky to meet a whole bunch of great people from around the state and outside the state even with our classes. We partner up with Professional Solutions Group, which is another more of an executive protection security company, but they apply some of those things. Again, they're also active law enforcement officers. We've partnered up with them because they bring some expertise to the table. And we've run a number of really great classes there. And we've done a few other investigative classes, Narcotics Investigator School, and we've done some of the other types of, the generalized training courses that a lot of other people do in terms of just overall, developing skills. And that is one thing where I'm very lucky. With the backgrounds that I have and you have very similarly, we have the ability to develop curriculum. Somebody can come to us and say, I have a specific need here. I need training to deal with this kind of situation, and we can build it. And I've done it with you. We've done classes for retailers where they've had risks of armed robbery, and you and I went in, and I remember these days where we went in and developed the training curriculum and then trained the employees. We're very lucky to be able to possess those skills. The healthcare industry is in Michigan, as you know, a lot of hospitals, security have armed themselves with tasers. We were able to step in and do taser operator training for a number of the healthcare facilities, and been able to produce a couple articles about the value of having tasers in the healthcare environment, which is kind of a new thing for them. So we just go out there and we address needs. We do a little bit of consulting as well. We've done some emergency planning for some corporate clients. A lot of companies find themselves not very well prepared for the scary things, like the active shooters and the active workplace violence situations that occur and get a lot of national headline. Makes companies start to realize that they need to better prepare for those situations, but then you find out that they're not really prepared for medical emergencies and evacuations and other things that are even mandated by law in some cases. So we've been lucky to come in and apply some of our expertise, some of our personnel that are highly trained in those areas. We go in and work with our corporate clients to help develop, emergency planning, emergency preparedness. So we're pretty versatile. We're pretty diverse, in that regard, and we're lucky that's been able to keep us alive.
Yeah, I won't go into the stories, but we do a lot of the workplace violence, the prevention and response too. And I remember sitting around a bunch of very high-paid CEOs and try to explain to them that their office area where the all of the head officers, had their place. I said, what you've done is you've created a kill zone. I said, every part of the building has a quick way to get out, except for where all the executives are, and there you guys are all bottled up and trapped. And they said, well, we don't have to worry about that because that's a gun-free zone. I said, yeah, that's good. So, you know, it's we run into a lot of interesting things when we're reaching out and trying to help people and raise their awareness to what reality really is. And then once they understand that, of course, then they can make the choices that'll help protect them, and that's good. And we're always glad to be there for that purpose. Brian, what are some things that you would like to just kind of maybe sum up? Talk about your company, maybe what your mission statement is, however you want to use this last bit of time here to kind of get the message out. And, you know, again, it's an honor for me to do this because I really believe a lot in you as a trainer, and I know how much good work you've done with your school. I'm very honored to be a part of that process, and I want to do what I can to let people know about your programs because I believe your programs will really help people. And, you know, like you said, I agree 100%. I tell my students, go train with Lou, go train with Joe, go train with Brian. You never want to be with just one trainer because no matter how good an individual is as a trainer, you're always going to benefit from being with other good trainers too. So you would never want to limit your opportunity to be a better practitioner by limiting the trainers that you work with. Go out and get the benefit of seeing different people's perspectives. And so I'm glad to have this opportunity to kind of help people be aware of your programs. And how is it you'd like to end this?
Well, that feeling's reciprocal, Ian, with you, my friend. You know, we've had some great journeys together over the years, and you know, with Joe and Lou and some of us that have come along with our group, that we all intertwine philosophically, methodology-wise, training-wise. You know, I guess I would leave a very brief message for anyone watching this broadcast, and that is, you know, train hard, train often. It doesn't matter what your role is. That violence can come your way at any time. You don't have to be a police officer, you know, to be in harm's way. Just turn on the the 6 o'clock news every day, and it's right there. You know, we happen to live in an area of the country where, you know, we were sandwiched between two of the most dangerous cities in the country, and there's a need to train. Training is perishable. You can't just train and stop training and then think you're going to be fine. You know, you're not going to rise to that occasion. You're going to fall to your level of training. So continue to train. Go out and seek good trainers. Make sure the methods that are being taught are simple, easy to learn, hard to forget. That's very important. Anything complex doesn't work. And just about any of us any of the men I've mentioned here tonight will all tell you that same story. And so, you know, seek out good trainers and keep training. You know, Ian, it's been a wonderful experience talking with you tonight, and can't thank you enough for bringing me aboard and letting me talk about Fortis Group and some of the important, really, things that we're trying to do out there for people. And can't thank you enough for your friendship and your fellowship and everything you've taught me through the years as well, my friend.
Well, thank you very much. And if folks would like to learn more about Fortis Group, of course, you can see it there in the bottom third. It is fortisgroupllc.us. Please go visit their website. And if you'd like to learn more about Live Safe Academy, please visit us online at livesafeacademy.com. Brian, thank you so much, sir. Always an honor, and I look forward to having you in many more Google Hangouts, excuse me, and also in the podcast too. And you know, you and I got a date for that podcast on response time, and I'm eager to get that one out there. So when the time works out, we're going to have a great resource for folks to benefit from. Thank you, sir. You have a great night.
Thanks, Ian. You too.